Hi scholars, this is Miss Quinones and I'm really excited to be back online with you guys. Today we're going to be doing a music lesson and we are going to be learning about the music alphabet. I know that sounds kind of silly, but the music alphabet are the note names. We need the music alphabet and we kind of need to memorize it because if we don't, then we're never going to know which note is which or what their names are. Okay, so before we get started, you're going to need a few things. The first thing you're going to need is some paper. I think notebook paper is going to be the best for this lesson because we're actually going to be writing out some notes and some music. And whenever we write out music, we need to have straight lines and just be really careful about what we do. So I think notebook paper is going to be your best choice here. And then also make sure that you grab a pencil. Don't be using a pen or a marker today because remember, this is an important lesson. And if we make mistakes, I don't want you to ruin your whole paper for it, okay? So make sure that you have a pencil and an eraser handy. Also make sure, scholars, that while we're going through this lesson, if there's anything that you need to rewind or pause to catch up, go ahead and do that. Remember, you can watch this as many times as you need to until you feel like you've got this information down. You can also ask me questions in Google Classroom, or you can send me an email if anything is ever too confusing or you just need some extra help, okay? So now that you have your notebook paper and your pencil, let's go ahead and get started. And don't worry, scholars, I'm going to let you know whenever you need to stop or pause to take notes, okay? So for now, what I want you to do is set your piece of paper and your pencil just right next to you on the side. And then I'm going to go through some things first, and I'm going to tell you when you're good to take your notes and to copy my screen, okay? So scholars, the first thing that I want to talk about for our music alphabet is the staff. Now the music staff is this chunk of lines that you see here. I just put some brackets around these lines, and the staff is really important because it's where our music lives. Whenever we see music on paper, we always see how there's a bunch of lines happening behind those notes. And this staff is really important because if the notes don't have anywhere to live, if they don't have the staff to sit on, then we don't really know what their names are, okay? At the front of our music, we usually have something called a treble clef. Now the treble clef, I'm drawing it right here. It's always that squiggly thing that we see at the front of our music. And a treble clef is important because it's the thing that gives our notes their specific names. It's the thing that uses the music alphabet and tells us which notes are which. So it's actually pretty important. You're going to see some other things like a bass clef or an alto clef. Those are for different instruments, but most instruments actually use the treble clef. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The other important thing you're going to see on our staff where our music lives are 5 lines and 4 spaces. So before we talk about the spaces, let's count these lines. Whenever we talk about these lines, we always want to start from the bottom. So let me start from the bottom. We have line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and line 5. Notice I always started from the bottom. We don't want to start from the top whenever we count our lines. We always want to start from the bottom and build our way up. Now for our spaces. Our spaces are in between our lines. So we have our 5 lines. The spaces are the spaces, literally, between each line. So that's space number 1, space 2, space 3, and space 4. So here you can see I only have 4 spaces because I don't have as much space between my lines. I only have 4. Okay? So scholars, now what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video. I want you to write down everything that I put in yellow. So I want you to write the staff at the top of your page. I want you to write 5 even lines just like I did. I want you to count them just like I did. So I'm going to put all these in yellow. I want you to count out the spaces that we did too. And then in the corner, I want you to write 5 lines and 4 spaces. Okay, so you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts of this written down on your notes. Go ahead and hit pause and do that now. All right, scholars, if you are done with making all your notes for this page, we're going to go ahead and start learning which letters we actually use in our music alphabet. Remember, if you're not done making these notes, just hit pause and get everything that's outlined in yellow on your paper. All right, scholars, so the music alphabet actually only uses 7 letters, which is kind of funny. It only uses the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So we have A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, E is 5, F is 6, and G is 7. So I have my 7 letters. Whenever I run out of letters, all we do is reuse the ones we already have. So whenever we run out of letters, we just start back at the top. So A is always the front of our letter alphabet, and then G is always the end. Okay, scholars, we're going to see how it uses just the same 7 letters over and over and over again. And I want you to think of the music alphabet as really, really small, but we have to kind of memorize where these notes go, okay? You don't have to take any of this down, except I want you to write down 7 letters, what I put in yellow, and then I want you to write these 7 letters of the music alphabet with this big arrow going backwards so that you know whenever I run out of letters, I just have to go back to the beginning and start over with my alphabet. Okay, scholars? So this one you don't have that much to write. Go ahead and hit pause so that you get your letters, your arrow, and your title down. All right, scholars, if you have finished writing down all 7 letters with your arrow, then we're going to start learning the actual names of all those lines and spaces that we made earlier. So our lines, remember we had 5 lines, our lines have names to them. Our first name is, oh, I should do that in yellow, is E down here. See how it's sitting in the middle of this line? The middle of this note is sitting on that very first line. So our first line, that name is E. Our next line, that name is G. We can see how that note, the note G, is sitting in the middle of that line. Our next one is B. It's also sitting on the 3rd line actually. So we had our first line E, our second line G, our 3rd line B, our 4th line is D. That line is a little bit shorter. And then our last line, that 5th line right at the top, is F. A way that we can remember all of these note names is with this like really fun sentence. So what we like to say is every good burger deserves fries. And I know it's kind of a silly sentence, and it's kind of weird to read something from the bottom up, but this silly sentence actually helps us remember our line names. So we had our first line that was E. Remember, that's line number 1. Remember, our first line is always going to be E. We can remember that with our sentence by saying every. Our next line is always going to be G. We can remember that with the word good. Our next line is always going to be B. We can remember that with burger. Our next line is always D, so that's that 4th line. It's always going to be deserves. And our last line is F, right there at the top of that 5th line, and it's always going to be fries. So here we have this silly sentence. It says, every good burger deserves fries. And if you can tell, this silly sentence, all of those notes match up with the first letter of that sentence, or sorry, of that word. Okay, scholars, so what I want you to do right now is make this same slide on your paper. So I want you to write the words line names at the top. I put it in yellow. I want you to write the 5 lines of your staff, just like always. So write those 5 lines and then make your notes with the letters or the names inside them. And then write your silly sentence right next to it. So just like I have mine here, I want your notes to look the same. And if you want to use a few different colors to help you remember or to see things better, you can do that too. Okay, go ahead and pause this video. And if I have it written in yellow or underlined in yellow, I want you to see it on your notes too. All right, scholars, if you have finished making all of your notes, that means that you'll have the line names written at the top. You're going to have your 5 lines going from bottom to top, and you're going to have your silly sentence matching with all of your note names. So all of the note names for the lines, remember line number 1 is E, every. Line number 2 is G, good. Line 3 is B, burger. Line 4 is D, deserves. And line 5 is F for fries. So our whole silly sentence is every good burger deserves fries. Okay, scholars, so let's keep going. Let's learn the names of the spaces. All right, scholars. Now the spaces, remember, there's not as many spaces as there are lines. There's only 4 spaces. Now the 4 spaces, we know the spaces because the middle of the note is not sitting on a line. It's sitting on a space. Let's go ahead and go back and look at our lines. Whenever we look at our lines and we look at the notes, we can see how our note is sitting in the middle of that line, remember? But for our spaces, the notes are sitting in a space. Oops. Our notes are sitting in a space. So see, when I make these new lines, there's nothing to go through. There's nothing to sit on top of. It's just sitting in between the ones that were made already. Okay, so for the space names, you can probably figure out we don't really need a silly sentence because it already makes a word for us. So our very first space is F. That's space number 1. Our next space is A. That's space number 2. Our next space is C. That's space number 3. And our last and 4th space is E. That's space number 4 right there at the very top. Remember, we're still going from bottom to top. So our space names, they spell out the word face. So what we like to say is face in the space. We like to use this sentence instead of a silly sentence because it's easy, because it rhymes. So for all of our space names, all we need to remember is that it spells the word face. So starting from the bottom, see how it spells the word face. We start with F, then we go to A, then C, and we finish with E. So we have face in the space for the space names. Okay, scholars, what I want you to do now is again, pause the video. Anything that I have outlined in yellow, just like the last one, I want you to have on your paper too. Okay, so I want you to have these numbers that I wrote out. I want you to have the little rhyme that we have on our side. Remember to get not just the note, but also the name inside the note. So remember, when you write this first note and you write the number 1, An F needs to go inside that one, okay? At the very top, you can also write space names so that you don't forget, okay? Go ahead and pause this video, and I want your notes to look just like my slide. Okay, scholars, so now if you have your space names, your notes, your face in the space written on the side, we are gonna move forward, okay? This is it for all of our notes today, scholars. So what I need you to do now is show me your notes, show me your work, okay? So what we're gonna do is take a picture of the music staffs. If you made more than one or all the ones that you made today, take a picture of your notes and music staff that you made. Make sure that all of your notes are labeled. That means that they each have the names inside them, the little letters, they need to have them inside. Also make sure that you have them for the lines and the spaces. Okay, don't leave any out. So anything that you took notes on today, just take a picture of it and I want you to send it to me. You can put the picture either in Google Classroom or you can put it in Flipgrid. If you put it in Flipgrid, remember you can use our join code. It's the same as before, guys. So like in the very beginning of the year, it's the exact same Flipgrid code and link, okay? The link is also gonna be in your Google Classroom assignment. And if you don't wanna use Flipgrid, remember just take a picture of it and put it in your Google Classroom assignment, okay? I am also going to give you an example of maybe what your notes can look like, okay? So make sure that your notes are looking pretty close to this slide of space names and also this slide of line names. Remember, you can go back and you can go back into the video, scholars, and work with me again. So if you maybe mess something up or you maybe mixed up your lines and your spaces, just go back in the video, try doing it again with me, okay? Whenever you get me your work, I'm gonna be so excited to see it. Remember, you can use Flipgrid or Google Classroom. It's your choice. And I'm gonna be putting up an example of the notes and the lines and the names and everything for you in case you need some extra help, okay? I'm looking forward to seeing all your work, scholars. I'll see you later.